Hi YouTube, Darth here. This week on the Battlefield 4 community test environment, we got a sampler of what's to come in the Battlefield 4 spring patch. I'm sure you probably already heard, but the latest content to arrive on the CTE was the addition of 5 new weapons, which I'll talk about shortly. In addition to that big news, I'll talk about all the other changes, tweaks, and updates that happened this week. So let's get started. First up is the change you might have heard about, but DICE LA added 5 new weapons. In no particular order, they added the AN-94, the OTS-1 and 4 Groza twins, the L86A2, and a weapon called the Mare's Leg. All of these weapons are just getting to a usable state, so there's still a lot of tweaks to come. The stats are in flux, and most notably every one of them but the OTS-1 lacks a texture. First up, the AN-94 you may already be familiar with, and it's the specialized assault rifle also found in Battlefield 3 that fires a 2-round burst. In Battlefield 4 it has a selective fire that allows you to fire the weapon in single shot, 2-round burst, or fully automatic. Presently the AN-94 fires at 600 rounds per minute, which in full auto gives the rifle similar characteristics to the SAR-21. In burst, however, it also fires 600 rounds per minute, which has some aficionados from Battlefield 3 scratching their heads. In Battlefield 3, the weapon fired in burst mode at 1200 rounds per minute, which gave it a serious advantage for those players that could tap with extreme speed. Will this get changed yet? We'll have to see, as these weapons are definitely not yet finalized. I have no preference about the burst, and my experience with the weapon was relatively positive, as I have enjoyed burst weapons pretty regularly in Battlefield 4 with the M4 and M16A4. The AN-94 in its current iteration felt like a particularly effective DMR. Next up, the OTS-1 appears as a carbine, and I have to say that of the weapons out there in this pack, this is my current favorite. Like its twin, it's a bullpup design which gives it a certain advantage when firing on the move, but it also penalizes its reload time compared to other carbines. At 725 rounds per minute, I found that this carbine needed a little bit more control but offered a ton of killing power. It fires a 7.62mm round, which makes it a bit different from the A91, and because of the bullet, it seemed to be a bit more effective when controlled at range than the A91 bullpup carbine. On the tail of its twin, we have the OTS-4 PDW for the Engineer class. Now, this weapon is supposed to fire the same bullets as the AS-VAL, and in theory it would do the same amount of damage. However, my experience was that the slower firing nature of this weapon made it handle quite a bit differently than the AS-VAL. I didn't really have a hugely positive experience with this weapon, but it could also have been the maps, modes, and players with which I was playing. Like the AS-VAL, the OTS-4 comes with a silencer that cannot be removed. The support class got its new weapon in the form of the bullpup L86A2, another weapon familiar to those from Battlefield 3. As a magazine-fed weapon, it has a little more stability than the heavier LMGs, and its current characteristics remind me a lot of the L85, a gun that's definitely one of my top favorites in Battlefield 4. Presently, the in-game magazine size is only 30, but it looks like it should be 60 when the gun is finalized. Based on the in-game stats page, I'm guessing that the smaller size is temporary, as the weapon doesn't seem to offer much over the other LMG choices without more ammunition. Finally, the Mare's Leg is a new secondary weapon available to all classes that serves as something of a pocket rifle. It's semi-automatic, and the bullet drop on the weapon is pretty extreme, but if you can pull off a headshot every time, it's really quite amazing. I think this is the weapon that DICE LA created in order to appease folks that had bemoaned the loss of accuracy on weapons like the Desert Eagle, which had also been a headshot machine at longer ranges. Get ready for lots of headshots, as the headshot multiplier in the game is increased for automatic weapons from a 2x multiplier to a 2.13x multiplier. At 2.35 times damage, the bolt action, slugs, and magnums remain unaffected, as do the shotguns at 1.0. The net effect of this increase for the other weapons is that at close range, the standard caliber carbines and assault rifles go from a 3-shot headshot to a 2-shot. This is important because the AN-94 fires a 2-shot burst. However, even with the increased headshot multiplier, the shots to kill of the heavy rifles and DMRs remains unchanged at 2. As part of the update to the CTE this week, DICE removed the night maps from the rotation, as the patch is supposed to be representative of the spring patch. Unfortunately, that means that there won't be any night maps coming out this spring, and DICE LA has stated that they just weren't ready. They'll be back after the current round of patch testing is done, and DICE is continuing to work on them while they're away. More than likely, we'll see these come along with a theoretical summer patch. If you hadn't gotten enough Battlefield 3 nostalgia with the weapons, then you'll be happy to learn that an entire game mode is returning from Battlefield 3. In Gunmaster, you start with a pistol and work your way through weapons and weapon tiers from Battlefield 4. At the end, assuming you were successful, you knife your enemy in order to finish the round with a win. I find that this game mode is particularly well suited to players that have a good sense of where the enemy team is going to spawn on these repurposed TDM and domination maps, and especially to players who have a good grasp on how to use the many different weapons from Battlefield 4. I definitely had a lot of fun playing the mode this weekend, though that could be because my team was on the winning side of things for the duration of my matches. And that is the one flaw with the game mode's basic premise, that the further behind your team gets, the harder it is to recover. There are a couple of other bugs, like being able to use battle pickups with the current version on the CTE, but DICE LA has stated they are working to resolve those in an upcoming update. As with every week, we've got a few fixes that would otherwise go unnoticed because they aren't necessarily flashy or new. DICE made several updates to support the night map friendly implementation of night vision scopes, continuing work went into fixing crash bugs, and the server setting that forced friendly fire to remain on in classic server settings has been made optional. That's it for this week on the Battlefield 4 community test environment. As you've seen, this week was mostly about the new content push for the Battlefield Spring patch. However, if the current build is representative of the Spring patch, then there are several changes that have been made over the last few months that will be making it into the Spring patch. For example, the straw nerf, head glitching fixes, and many other things have made it into the current build. So those will see the light of day sometime soon. But that wraps up this edition of CTE Sunday. If you're new around here, please take a look at my channel and consider subscribing. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time, YouTube.